Journalism is not just a profession, it is a public trust. At its best, journalism informs without fear, verifies before it speaks, and respects the intelligence of its audience. At its worst, however, it becomes something else entirely, not a mirror of reality, but a megaphone for impulse, ideology, and power. Today I want to talk about a growing credibility crisis, one that goes beyond a single outlet or a single country, and what happens when propaganda reaches its limits. A recent incident involving RT India illustrates this problem with unusual clarity. At an international forum focused on peace and trust, an event where words, optics, and protocol matter deeply, RT India published a post that misrepresented the reality surrounding Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. The framing suggested a narrative that simply did not align with what actually occurred. Now, this was not a harmless mistake. This was not a difference of interpretation. It was a distortion, and in journalism, distortion is not a technical error. It is an ethical failure. The problem with disinformation is that it rarely survives contact with facts. Almost immediately, the narrative raised questions because videos, photographs, and verified accounts contradicted the claim. Under mounting scrutiny, RT India deleted the post and issued a clarification. But here's the critical question. Is a clarification enough? A clarification corrects information. An apology acknowledges your mistake. When journalism crosses the line into yellow reporting, especially on matters of international diplomacy, responsibility does not end with deletion. Damage is done at the moment of publication. Perceptions are shaped instantly. Trust is eroded silently. What made this episode even more revealing was what happened next. RT's headquarters in Moscow stepped in. For an international media organization to intervene against its own regional arm is rare. It happens only when the credibility cost is too high to ignore. Moscow's involvement signaled something very important. This was not a routine slip. It was a breach serious enough to risk the reputation of the entire network. In trying to push a hurried, politically convenient narrative, RT India ended up dragging its parent organization into an unnecessary controversy. That is what happens when speed replaces scrutiny and alignment replaces accuracy. But this incident is not isolated. It reflects a broader pattern visible in hawkish segments of Indian media, where journalism increasingly resembles narrative warfare. In this ecosystem, being first apparently matters more than being right. Sensation is rewarded, verification is delayed, and ideology often outruns evidence. The short-term payoff is attention. The long-term cost, however, is credibility. Every deleted tweet, every forced clarification, every quiet correction chips away at public trust. Over time, audiences stop asking, "Is this true?" and start assuming, "What's the agenda?" And in this case, the outcome was unmistakable. The narrative collapsed. The post disappeared. A clarification replaced confidence. The story unraveled under its own weight. Now contrast this with Pakistan's response. There was no counter-disinformation, no emotional escalation, no retaliatory narrative. Instead, Pakistan relied on facts, official communication, and diplomatic restraint. It allowed verification to do the work, and that patience eventually paid off. As evidence surfaced, the false narrative lost oxygen. The burden of explanation shifted back to those who had rushed to publish. This is a very important lesson. Effective diplomacy does not need volume. What it needs is credibility, which brings us back to the central question: Why is a clarification not enough? Because journalism does not operate in rewind. Because first impressions matter. Because misinformation travels faster than corrections. And because trust, once weakened, is difficult to rebuild. If journalism wants to reclaim credibility, it must do more than correct errors after exposure. It must recommit to restraint before publication. It must remember that power without responsibility is not influence, it is propaganda. And propaganda, no matter how loud, always has a limit. Facts don't need defending forever. Truth doesn't require constant shouting. Eventually, reality catches up. The question is not whether propaganda collapses. The question is how much damage it causes before it does. That choice still lies with journalism itself. Stay tuned for more here at PolicyWire.